Welcome to the Possibility Hub video series. I'm Carol Talbot, the creator and founder of the Possibility Hub, an advocate for awakening, encouragement, and creating opportunities for an expansion of awareness and consciousness. In this episode, I'm in conversation with Detoxification and Cellular Rejuvenation Specialist Malcolm Slyper. Malcolm has travelled extensively, seeking out various healing modalities, and the core of his interest lies in restoring natural balance and harmony through detoxification and through a simple 3-pillar method. In this session, we're talking about a topic that's not often discussed: parasites. And you're going to receive a mini education on the basics of parasite and worm removal from the point of view of self-applied prevention. So enjoy. Hello, Malcolm. Welcome back to the third of our series of detoxing. And I thought it'd be good to start, just in case there's some people who haven't watched the first two, to just do a quick recap of where we are before we go into the gory details of today's session. We're laughing because we know what's coming up.
Not to be what's for lunch, yeah. Thanks, Carol. Thank you for having me back. And to have a very quick recap of our first two sessions. The first one covered the concepts of what we call human food and non-human food. So human food were foods that enhanced well-being, enhanced vibrancy and longevity. All of this was done in the context of taking somebody through a pre-cleanse initially, and then into a final cleanse, which we call the fast. So that was the first part of it. So aligning to the kind of foods that would enhance the body beginning to cleanse itself, lend itself to that, and then finally towards the fast. And then in our second session, we touched upon cleansing the 5 elimination organs. We looked at the human body as being, an analogy was a machine, and the machine had various filters. And when we clean these filters, then we get so much more out of who we are.
Fantastic. And that leads us to today's session, which I actually thought would be the first session. And now that we've gone through sort of, the right foods to eat to get things flowing, to open up the 5 organs of elimination, I can see the sense in waiting to get to this stage, because really we're looking at who's eating who. Are we food for, how far down the food chain are we? Because we're looking at parasites, such an important topic that often gets ignored. So how do we contract parasites? How do we get them? Or are they just kind of like a fact of life?
Today in our modern lifestyle, our first world lifestyle, we think that we've come to believe there's this unsaid message that gets imparted within us that parasites are not an issue. And as you and I were discussing privately before, our grandparents used to deworm the family at regular intervals.
My mother certainly did. We had animals, so they got done, we got done. We didn't know it, but we got done.
Yeah. So that tradition has almost in a way fallen away, and it's been lost in the security and this knowledge that our medical system has everything covered, and our clean lifestyle has made us, has risen us, has taken us above the fact that we could be vulnerable to parasites. And nothing could be further from the truth. International jet travel has made access to every realm of the earth easily accessible. But inside of that, we, by virtue of the diets that we follow, our bodies have become more toxic, and they've accumulated more waste. And at the end of the day, parasites are just nature's way of cleaning up waste.
So So how do we get them? Just are they a fact of life, or are there certain things and ways that we can get them? And I know, as I said, I grew up with a lot of animals. So, I'm very well aware that my animal, and I have animals now, I have 4 cats. So I'm very well aware that I actually need to deworm them on a regular basis. So if I'm doing them, I do me. And, I think as this image depicts, we love our animals dearly, but they are carriers.
Yeah, the animals are one vector. So typically, as you said, we really are endeared to animals. So we kiss our pets. The pets sleep in the beds with us. They're on the couch. They're everywhere. They eat from the table. And unfortunately, the dogs and cats and pets are carriers of parasites. And as a result, we pick up parasites from them, either directly or indirectly through their eggs and their larvae. But some of the other vectors and some of the other ways that parasites come to us are typically through unwashed vegetables. Some vegetables are more prone to it than others. So, for instance, lettuce or raw type foods are prone to parasites. My wife, unfortunately, contracted a parasite condition in barley, and that was just through a lack of hygiene in the kitchens that we were eating in, and the restaurants that we were eating in. So these are probably the most typical ways of picking it up. The other one, and as the slide of ours depicts on the bottom right, for those people that are sushi fans, unfortunately, the eating and the consumption of raw fish is a pretty surefire way of picking up parasites. Another typical way would be from the consumption of undercooked animal flesh, pork typically. A lot of people, particularly the Spaniards, love eating smoked pork, jamon. And I've come to understand that even the cooking process doesn't completely kill the parasites that may be in this flesh.
Ooh, it makes you feel like you want to change your diet. And I'm very glad that I'm a vegetarian. I shall clean my vegetables a little bit more thoroughly now, and I don't like sushi, so that's another plus for me.
It's always a shock for the sushi lovers.
Yeah. So what are the types of parasites? What are the common types that we need to look out for?
Parasites come in big and small, from the microscopic types that are visible only, obviously, under a microscope, to the bigger ones that are visible to the naked eye, the roundworms, the ascaris, the tapeworms. And some of these tapeworms...
Already.
It's really hard. We kind of think that we're sitting at the top of the food chain, and it's quite sobering to realize that you're not as far up the food chain as you'd like to think you are. And in fact, you're serving as a worm hotel or a worm motel, because they're in there, they're munching away, they're getting love, they're getting food, they're getting shelter. And
every now and then they're popping up and going, hey, where's my Mars bar? I didn't get dessert today.
Well, that's the thing. They're super smart. And there's clearly a mechanism that works between the parasite and the human brain. Is they start to instill messages into us. So they create a craving for the foods that they create. So one would find oneself with this complete fetish for chocolate or for sweets, for sweet things, for sugary based foods. And yet when these parasites are cleaned out, these desires go away.
So it's also a way to change your diet as well. So what are some of the symptoms that people should be looking out for?
If you look into the symptoms of parasites, they on its own, a single symptom is probably not indicative of a parasite, but you begin to see a pattern. And when you're having a number of symptoms showing up, there we have the slide. When we have a number of symptoms showing up, it begins to tell a story. So you've just brought up a slide with a whole list of, a non-exhaustive list of symptoms that are indicative of a potential parasite issue. But there's some, out of this list, there's some that really stand out. So typically one would have constipation or diarrhea. You could have brain fog, and that's because this parasite waste, these waste products that they have, circulate through our system and then affect the brain and affect our vitality and our general well-being. We could see a loss of interest. You'll often see with children sleeping at night, and they'll have saliva running out of the side of their mouth. Kids will complain, or even adults complain of the grinding of their teeth when they sleep at night. Stomach pain and tummy issues are frequent complaints. Sometimes if you look at somebody's, at their face, and they have these dark lower eyelids, these are also typical of or indicative of a potential parasite issue. So anyone on their own is probably not clue enough, but when we start to put all these symptoms together, a story begins to unfold. And often when they do the cleanses, they are absolutely horrified or amazed at what comes out.
Wow. And I think people are going to be a little bit shocked when they see this list. I mean, grinding teeth at night, that could be a symptom of parasites. And as you said, I think the important thing is if people just see one or two, that may not be indicative of parasites. But if they notice a number of those, then it surely is a sign to sort of get yourself cleaned up. Plus, would you agree that we should be cleaning ourselves up regularly from this, whether we see any of the symptoms or not, just because of what we're eating and the environment, or as you say, if we got pets, then there's a hazard there. So is this something that people should be doing on a regular basis? And if it is so on a regular basis, how regularly? Is it every month, every 3 months? What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, it takes us into that realm of taking responsibility for that which we're experiencing, or being proactive in life, actually. Through my years of experience in this realm, I've come to the firm conclusion that deworming or parasite cleanses should be a lifelong endeavor. We should always be on it in one way or another. And typically, if you go and talk to a doctor, they'll recommend that you deworm once or twice a year. Now, I don't think that's enough. And they have pharmaceutical solutions which could cater for that. But looking at the lifestyle of a parasite, for instance, the typical lifestyle is around 30 days. They have a life cycle that is in the body as well as outside of the body. So this parasite might live in the gut, and then at night it migrates out of the body through the anus, lays its eggs, creates the itchiness which people experience, and then it travels back into the body. And this process, this cycle repeats over roughly a 30-day period. So to break the cycle, you need to keep it at 30 days as an example. Then you could take a break for a while, for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then get back on it, but approach it from another angle. So what I found useful over the time of doing this is using different herbal formulas. I've become privy and befriended a master herbalist many, many years ago who gave me this education of parasites, which was a groundbreaking education. And his genius comes in taking various parasite formulas or parasite herbs, putting them together in very, very effective parasite formulas, which deal with different purposes. And his introduction to this theme originally came from Dr. Hildegard Clark. And if you remember, many, many years ago, she wrote a book, The Cure for All Diseases. And in this book, she alluded that many diseases were caused by parasites. So she became famous by taking several herbs, and I think there were 5 or 6 of them, and suggesting that we deworm with those. So this herbalist friend of mine then began to take those initial herbs, this triggered his interest, and he mixed them together into formulas. And as his knowledge grew, and obviously based on the results that he was seeing, he started to seek out more and more herbal formulas or more herbs, and made his formulas more complex to be the phenomenal blends that they are today. But the list in the slide that you brought up is, again, a non-exhaustive list of the plant-based modalities that have a multi-century history of being anti-parasitic. So this whole thing of cleaning worms and parasites out of the body isn't a recent acquisition of knowledge. This has been known for centuries, and these traditions have been passed on through herbalists and people involved, and people specialized in a natural approach to hygiene and to human health. And as we've gone down the years, herbalists have come along, they've compiled books, and this list is a pretty impressive list of some of the herbs that we found useful. And the value that I see is rotating formulas. So you'll try a particular formula for a while, and then after a period of time, you'll come off that formula and rotate onto another formula. It could be something as simple as taking aloe vera powder, putting it in a capsule. It could be something simple as taking neem powder, that's ground neem, putting that into a capsule and taking that for several days, and then rotating onto something else. And the way that you'll know that you're effective is if you pay attention to what's coming out. The worms and the parasites will always be seen in there. Now, obviously, not everybody appreciates the scientific approach, but I think the finest way to discover or to know if you're being effective with what you're doing is to pay attention to what's coming out.
So it's lovely to see that over the centuries, you know, people naturally knew what to do through all the herbs, all the plant medicines in order to clean themselves, and that many of those methods have been forgotten in modern day, that it's something that people don't think about. So considering that I know the majority of people that I speak to have never thought of doing a parasite cleanse, what are some of, and we've looked at some of the symptoms, what's the permanent damage if people continue to ignore parasite cleansing?
At the end of the day, you'll find there's a slow and gradual degradation of human health that comes about. And one of these effects we could call old age, or the aging effect, the accelerated aging effect. So being aware of parasites and knowing how to mitigate against them will mitigate against accelerated aging. So we'll keep our vibrancy way into our latter years. If we don't, we find more aches and pains creeping into the body. Some of them are unexplained. Some of the more severe cases of parasites coming in, for instance, the person might have eaten tarnished pork. Those tapeworms come in, they consume the food before the person has time to assimilate them. And then these things will spread through the body as they grow longer and bigger and do more and more damage. But ultimately, there are three ways that parasites hurt or damage us. And the first way, and this is a relatively more mild way that they hurt us, is by consuming our nutrients in our food before we've had time to assimilate and digest them. The second way, which is more severe, is where the parasite actually does damage to tissue or organs. So they'll wind up in the gut or in the liver, and they proceed to chomp away, consuming us, and in doing so hurt us. And the third one is more of an innocuous way, because we don't realize it and we don't associate it to the parasites. But these parasites obviously have a life cycle of their own. So they'll eat, they'll use their host as the food, and then they poop as well. They give off their waste. And these waste products get cycled through the body, and they are extremely destructive and extremely toxic. So if they wind up in the bloodstream, they go through the brain, and they create all manner of different symptoms, the least of which is to leave you feeling lousy. So the damage done is subtle, but far-reaching and very, very destructive.
And I think we have a slide here which shows the damage in the brain.
Yeah, this is an extreme. What we're looking at here was a tapeworm larva that had migrated through the body, and eventually this tapeworm wound up in the brain. And this led to all manner of neural problems and eventually death. That's an extreme.
Wow. Now there's a term called herxing in detoxing. What does that mean?
Yeah. So herxing is basically the result of the body detoxifying itself, or pathogen die-off. And this die-off and these byproducts that are being released by the body are not expelled out of the body quick enough. In other words, they overwhelm the organs of elimination, or these products just circulate through the body. Typically, when the body goes into a detox of sorts, it may mimic some of the conditions that arose initially. So I always say something stings twice. It stings on the way in and it stings on the way out. And it's this cleansing effect to the body. As the body releases these encumbrances, it shows up again. And it could show up in many different ways. Sometimes it comes out, the person comes down with colds, another cold or a flu type symptom. They get the shivers, they feel lousy, they have accelerated heartbeat. There are a plethora of different ways that it could affect you. And if you know what you're looking at and you understand this experience that the body is going through, you'll realize, I'm detoxing, I'm herxing, and you keep going and you don't stop, or you slow down the detox protocol. Perhaps you're just detoxing faster than your elimination channels can handle, in which case you slow it down and go back to cleaning out the 5 elimination channels that we spoke of earlier.
Okay, so now we probably put the fear of God in people, and they're sort of itching, scratching, and it's like, okay, what do we do about it? And we've also shared that there's many herbal formulas out there that help to clear those easily and effortlessly. What is your recommendation in terms of cleansing and clearing and removal?
I've spent an adult lifetime looking at this particular problem, looking at how we can go about cleaning up the body. And again, it's brought me back to this model that I use of this pre-cleanse, and then targeting the 5 elimination organs, getting them draining their waste down and out, so that when we start killing parasites, instead of them that die off and their waste products being circulated through us, they will, in a speedy manner, get taken out of the body. So that's the first part of it. And then the next part of the problem is turning to how do we kill the parasites, or how do we mitigate against them being in us. And basically what we want to do is make life so uncomfortable within the body that they choose, they go, this is not the place I want to be, and move out. So the easiest way that I've found is to identify and to use certain herbal formulas which will make life so unpleasant that they'll either die, or they'll choose to pack their bags and ship themselves out. And there are different ways of applying these herbal remedies. Some of them are put onto the skin, because we know the skin is an organ of assimilation. Some can be taken orally. So when we take it orally, they go through the stomach and they wind up in our bloodstream. And then it's the bloodstream ultimately that does the work. And it'll send those plant-based minerals to the far corners of the body, wherever the bloodstream goes. And if the parasite's there, they are going to be affected by it, either killed or move out. Sometimes what happens is the parasite formulas through the transport mechanism of the blood, makes life so unpleasant for them that they choose to move out and they move to the bowel, because we don't get the parasite formula going into the bowel per se, and one needs another method of targeting the bowel, for instance. And that's where your enemas and your coffee enemas and your colonics come in. So when the colonics are done hand in hand with the herbal formulas, then one gets, and as these parasites then rush to the bowel, they're eliminated through the enema. So that's...
So it's not just, the herbal formulas or one type, it's hitting it from many different ways. And also, since you said there's different types of parasites, are some more resistant? I know if I go to the pharmacy and ask for a parasite tablet, they give me a pack just with one tablet in, but I always get two, because I know if I take one, then 10 days later, I need to take the second one to make sure that it's totally clean. So that's one way. And also both you and I work with Cambo, which is particularly effective as well in cleansing parasites. So are there certain parasites that are really resistant that need a stronger approach?
Most parasites have a cycle inside and outside of the body. So by using your herbal approaches, for instance, for long enough, we hope to break that cycle. That's the first part of it. And those are the more easy ones to get to. The other easy ones to get to, for instance, are the little sheep or liver fluke that tend to live in the liver. And they love the liver because in the liver is one of the few organs that will replenish itself. So as they munch away, the liver will just regenerate itself. So they've got a constant source of food in there. And this is why within the space of our pre-cleanse, we generally target the liver with the adult herbal parasite formula that I've found and learned to find great value in. But there are other parasites that are more resilient, and those typically are the tapeworms. And a new one that we've only recently become aware of in the last decade or so, and that's called the human ropeworm. And we're not actually sure if the ropeworm can be considered a true parasite because it doesn't have this life cycle inside and outside the body. It only lives in the body. And the current thought line is that by virtue of the GMO foods that we're eating, the heavy metal onslaught that we have, the body starts to create, it has bacterial colonies within it that come to clean up this mess. And as they clean up these chemicals, they become basically garbage compactors within the body. And these bacterial colonies then become a full-blown organism of its own. And this organism grows in size, and it also becomes parasitic at some stage or damaging to the body because it consumes or starts to devour the host. So when we do the various cleansers that target these ropeworms and we do coffee enemas, that's when we see them coming out. And people are often in awe that they could contain so much inside of them and they could be so big coming out. And I think we've got a slide there that depicts.
Yes, I was nervous about putting up this slide. It's rather gross, but where is it? Here it is. Yes. Yeah. So we've got some here, and you've put like 2 centimeters, but over here we can see, yes, rather disgusting.
Pretty horrific. Did you bring that slide up for a second there, Carol?
Sorry?
Did you bring that slide up for a second?
Oh, sorry, I thought it was up. Okay, then I seem to have. Sorry, I thought it was. I was looking at it.
Censorship board at work here.
That's why I was going because I was seeing it. Let's see if I can get that up. Here we go. Yes. So here we've got the 2 centimeter ones, the small ones, and then over here on the other side. Oof.
So on the left-hand side of the screen is what we call the fifth stage of this ropeworm. It's got 5 stages that it goes through, and this is the fifth stage. When it becomes rather big, there'll be a sucker aspect to it on the head, which attaches itself to the intestine. When they break off or they break loose, one would notice blood there, and that's evident that they've been feeding on the host. And they can grow up to 3-4 feet long, if not longer. And on the picture on the right is a lady who'd removed one of these from her son. And this thing was at least, 6 feet long over there. So they get to be pretty big. But prior to this thing coming out, the person would have a host of symptoms. And yet when the parasite is released, a lot of those symptoms dissolve and go away, which gives us hope that our work was effective.
Well, that actually preempts the question I was going to ask you, sort of how do you know when you are clear of completely clear of parasites, and is there such a thing?
Yeah, I don't think you'll ever be clear, because they keep, or they do come back, and some people are obviously more prone to them than others. But what I've seen is when they are out of the body, the primary thing that I've noticed is your thinking is super clear. You've got a sense of vibrancy about yourself. Your skin is clear, your eyes are clear, and you don't drool in your sleep at night.
So if your partner's dribbling at night...
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So do you want to just share a little about some of the formulas that you have available on your website that, you know, contain a lot of the herbs and natural elements that we talked about that can help people, and what you think they should start with?
Yeah. I appreciate you asking this, and I in no way intend or see it as being a plug for these formulas. I've spent a considerable amount of time trying different formulas, and it just so happens that this one, as an entry-level formula, is a really, really good one. But there are many ways of skinning the cat, and there are many formulas that do work, and there are people out there with different products. I return to this one over and over again, or this range, because they're so effective. They get the job done. Ultimately, we're looking for a tool that will be very, very effective at doing a specific job. And if in our pre-cleanse, we're looking at cleaning up the liver, we're looking at getting at the basic parasite load within the body, then the adult parasite cleanse that I have on my website is a super, super effective formula. When we've gone through this basic cleanse, the person, if they're so inspired, can go on to some of the more advanced formulas. So they're formulas that we spray on the skin, they absorb through the skin. There's another one that we spray into the air when we're in a confined room, like a bathroom. So we'll take those herbal qualities and properties in through the breathing, through the lungs, and put them into the bloodstream like that. One of the more fascinating and interesting ones that I have, and I sell it on the website, is something called a Russian zapper. And we've chuckled about this a few times.
I've got one, actually, and I'm still plucking up the courage. Affectionately known as the Sputnik, right?
It's made by a Russian company in Tomsk, and it was originally developed for the Russian space program in the 70s. And they understood back then that one of the problems of being in space is that the cosmonauts' organs, internal organs, would go sluggish. So they wanted something that would emit a little shock as it worked its way through the body that would then perk their organs up to be more effective. So the cosmonauts would take these, but what they all came back and reported is that they were having huge amounts of parasites expelled. So this little capsule then became more widely known, and eventually one of the names it was given was the Kremlin capsule, because when the Russian bureaucracy or the political body got wind of the wildness of it, they commanded full access to it, and they used to use it amongst themselves, obviously, to keep themselves well. And then with the fall of the Iron Curtain, they started to make them more available to the population at large. And there's a very amusing account on my website where a guy had taken one of these things, swallowed it, and as you swallowed it, it emits a little shock as it goes through the digestive tract. So you'll first feel the little shock, the mini shock on the tongue or under the tongue, and then as it goes through the digestive tract, initially you forget about it. And then as an hour or two may pass, and it comes up against a nerve or a muscle reflex point somewhere in the bowel that is connected to another part of the body, it'll create a tingle somewhere in the body. So this particular guy, and as he writes this very amusing account, reports that he's walking in a shopping mall with his girlfriend. And the next thing, he felt this enormous shock that obviously had happened somewhere in the bowel, and his leg shot out in front of him, and his girlfriend looked at him in horror as if he was losing it. And he said, "Darling, you'll never understand." These capsules result in the expelling of all manner of parasites. And the beauty of them is that their battery lasts for maybe 80, 90 hours. So if one is short of money, and they're quite pricey, is you'll catch it, you'll trap it, wash it down, sterilize it, and you take it again. It's good for 3 runs. Obviously, those who've got a bit of
3 successive rounds, or you can hold off for the second round.
You could, because it's only activated by virtue of it coming into contact with the liquid and closing that circuit. So the moment it's dry, it stops the little mini voltage or the mini shock. But to be most effective, it's done, we use it when the person is fasting, and we'll take it back to back over 3 or 4 days.
Wow. That's really thorough, and something I've got to look forward to. All right, so I will put your website details below this video. Once again, I thank you. So now we're on stage 3, and next week we go into the actual cleanse. And what happens then? This is the pre-cleanse stage, and now you should be, if you've got through this stage, not completely put off, you should be ready to start your full-on cleanse. And so next week we'll be talking a little about what would make a good cleanse, what to expect next.
All of this preparation we're doing makes for the cleanse itself being an easy non-event. It makes it really, really easy to do.
Yes, and so many people, when they go on a cleanse, they're suffering from headaches and all sorts of things. And if you've done this pre-cleanse, then those symptoms are not going to occur. So that's beautiful. So thank you so much, Malcolm, for this enlightening and interesting session. Hope we haven't grossed too many people out. And it's important stuff to know. It truly is. So enjoy your afternoon, and I will enjoy mine.
Thank you, Carol. Great afternoon to you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.